5 words from a cancer survivor changed daytime television forever. But it wasn't the words themselves that froze Ellen DeGeneres mid-sentence. It was the silence that followed. The silence that lasted exactly 47 seconds, long enough for 200 audience members to forget they were watching a show and remember they were witnessing something sacred. The cameras kept rolling. But Ellen had stopped being a host. In that moment, surrounded by bright studio lights and the weight of an impossible truth, she became something else entirely, a woman who understood that some stories are too important for entertainment. Let me take you back to what happened before those 5 words shattered everyone in that Burbank studio. It was Wednesday afternoon at Stage 1 on the Warner Bros. Lot. Ellen DeGeneres was taping what should have been a routine episode of her talk show, the kind that had made her America's beloved daytime queen for nearly 2 decades. The energy was infectious as always. Ellen working the crowd with her signature blend of humor and warmth, dancing her way through commercial breaks, making everyone feel like they were part of her extended family. Sarah Matthews sat in the guest chair, a 34-year-old teacher from Portland, Oregon, who had been invited to the show after her story went viral on social media. At first glance, Sarah looked like any other inspiring survivor who had graced Ellen's stage over the year. She wore a bright blue dress that complemented her newly grown hair, styled in a pixie cut that framed her face beautifully. Her smile was radiant, her posture confident. To the studio audience, she embodied hope, living proof that cancer could be beaten. Ellen had noticed something different about Sarah during the pre-interview. Maybe it was the way Sarah's eyes would drift away when asked about her treatment, or how she clutched her purse just a little too tightly when discussing her recovery. There was a weight in Sarah's presence that went beyond typical survivor gratitude. It was the weight of someone carrying a secret too heavy for one person to bear. "Sarah, let's start at the beginning," Ellen had said during their introduction, settling into her chair with the easy confidence of someone who had conducted thousands of interviews. "Tell our audience about your diagnosis." Sarah had nodded, her voice clear and steady. "I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 18 months ago. The doctors told me I had a 60% chance of survival with aggressive treatment. I was terrified, but I was ready to fight." The audience had responded with warm applause, the kind of supportive energy that made Ellen's show a safe space for people to share their most vulnerable moments. Ellen smiled, that warm smile that had endeared her to millions, but something in Sarah's tone made her lean forward slightly, her interviewer instincts picking up on an undercurrent she couldn't quite identify. The conversation progressed normally through the first segment. Sarah talked about the chemotherapy, the support from her students and colleagues, the way her community had rallied around her. Ellen asked all the right questions, offered all the appropriate encouragement. They discussed Sarah's return to teaching, her newfound appreciation for life, her plans to run a marathon for cancer research. But during the second segment, everything changed. Ellen was asking about Sarah's recovery process when she noticed tears beginning to form in her guest's eye. Not the happy tears of gratitude you might expect from a cancer survivor sharing her triumph. These were different. These were the tears of someone who had been holding back a truth too painful to speak. "Sarah," Ellen said gently, her voice softer now, stripped of all performance. "What aren't you telling us?" The studio fell quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something significant was happening. Sarah looked down at her hands, then back up at Ellen. And in that moment, Ellen saw something that stopped her cold. It wasn't just pain in Sarah's eye. It was a kind of desperate relief. The look of someone who was finally ready to tell a truth they'd been carrying alone. "Ellen," Sarah whispered, her voice so quiet the microphones barely picked it up. "Can I tell you something that I've never told anyone?" Every instinct told Ellen to handle this during the commercial break, to maintain the show's energy and pacing. But something deeper, something more important than television, made her make a choice that would define not just that episode, but her entire understanding of what it meant to truly listen. Ellen reached across and took Sarah's hand. "Stop the music," she called out to the production booth, her voice carrying an authority that silenced everyone immediately. "Stop everything." The familiar Ellen DeGeneres Show theme music cut out. The audience fell completely silent. Even the producers in the booth stopped giving direction. Ellen stood up, walked around the coffee table and sat on the edge of the chair next to Sarah, giving her full, undivided attention. "Sarah," Ellen said softly, "what do you want to tell me?" Sarah wiped her eyes and looked directly at Ellen. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong in a way that surprised everyone who heard it. What came next would change everything. "I'm not a survivor, Ellen. I'm dying." 5 words. 5 simple words that hit the studio like a physical force. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row brought their hands to their hearts. Ellen DeGeneres, the woman who had built a career on quick wit and perfect timing, was completely speechless. But Sarah wasn't finished. The dam had broken, and the truth came pouring out, a truth she had kept hidden from everyone, including her own family. "The doctors told everyone I was in remission," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "They told my family, my friends, my students. Everyone celebrated, everyone threw parties, everyone called me their miracle. But what they didn't tell anyone, what they told only me, was that the cancer had already spread to my brain. I have maybe 6 months left." The silence in the studio was deafening. Ellen's mouth fell open slightly. She had hosted thousands of shows, faced every possible situation television could throw at her, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Sarah kept talking, as if speaking these words aloud was the most liberating thing she had ever done. "The doctors said they didn't want to destroy hope for my family. They said it would be easier for everyone if I had time to get my affairs in order privately. But do you know what it's like to pretend you're celebrating life when you're preparing to die?" Ellen reached into her jacket and pulled out a tissue, gently wiping the tears from Sarah's face. Her own eyes were now filled with tears, but she didn't try to hide them. "Sarah," Ellen managed to say, her voice thick with emotion, "how long have you been carrying this alone?" "Since the day I got the real results," Sarah whispered. 4 months ago, I've been smiling and accepting congratulations and planning for a future I'll never see. I came here today because I thought if I could tell someone, anyone, the truth, maybe I could figure out how to tell my family." What happened next is why Ellen DeGeneres wasn't just a talk show host. She was a human being who understood that some moments transcend television, transcend entertainment, transcend everything except pure human connection. Ellen stood up slowly and did something unprecedented in daytime television. She walked to center stage and addressed her entire audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying a gravity that filled every corner of the studio. "We're going to do something we've never done before. We're going to stop being a television show for a moment, and we're going to be a family." She turned back to Sarah. "Sarah, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. And you know what? You're not dying. Right now, in this moment, you are living more fully than most people ever do, because it takes incredible courage to tell the truth when it's this hard." Ellen sat back down next to Sarah and took both her hands. "Now, let's figure out together how you're going to tell your family. Not because you have to, but because they love you, and they deserve the chance to love you through this too." What happened next was pure magic. The audience, understanding they were witnessing something sacred, began to stand, not in applause but in silent support. One by one, 200 strangers rose to their feet, not as a television audience, but as a community surrounding one woman who had found the courage to speak her truth. Ellen looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this at home, and you're carrying something too heavy to bear alone, please don't. There are people who love you, people who want to help carry that weight." Sarah just showed us what courage looks like. It looks like telling the truth, even when it's the hardest thing in the world to do. She turned back to Sarah. "Now, what do you say we call your family? Right here, right now." Through her tears, Sarah nodded, and for the next 20 minutes, daytime television became something it had never been before, a bridge between isolation and community, between fear and hope, between dying alone and living surrounded by love. The episode that aired 3 weeks later became the highest-rated Ellen DeGeneres Show episode in the series' history. But more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about medical communication, patient advocacy, and the importance of truth in terminal diagnosis. Sarah Matthews did tell her family. With Ellen's support, she found a way to share not just her diagnosis, but her desire to spend her remaining time creating memories instead of pretending everything was fine. She started a blog called Living While Dying that reached millions of people facing similar situations. 6 months later, Sarah passed away peacefully, surrounded by her family and the teachers and students who had become her chosen family. But she didn't die alone with her secret. She died having lived more authentically in her final months than many people manage in a lifetime. At Sarah's memorial service, her sister read a letter Sarah had written to Ellen. "Thank you for showing me that the scariest thing, telling the truth, was actually the thing that set me free. Thank you for stopping your show and starting something more important, a conversation about how we die, how we live, and how we love each other, through both." Ellen attended that memorial service. She spoke about Sarah not as a former guest, but as someone who had taught her what television could be at its very best, not entertainment, but connection. Not performance, but presence. Today, the Ellen DeGeneres Show is remembered for many things. The dancing, the giveaways, the celebrity interviews. But for those who were in Studio One that Wednesday afternoon, it will always be remembered as the day television stopped being television and became something more important, a reminder that everyone has a story worth telling, a truth worth hearing, and a heart worth healing. Sarah's 5 words, "I'm dying, Ellen, I'm dying," changed not just daytime television, but everyone who heard them. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pretending everything is fine and start admitting when it isn't. That's what courage looks like. That's what love sounds like. And that's what happens when someone finds the strength to tell the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Ellen kept a photo of Sarah on her desk for the rest of the show's run, not as a reminder of death, but as a reminder of life. The kind of life that's lived fully, honestly, and surrounded by the love that comes when we stop pretending and start being real. Because Sarah was right, she wasn't dying. She was living. And she taught all of us how to do the same. But the story doesn't end there. What happened in the weeks following that episode revealed something even more powerful about the impact one moment of truth can have on the world. Within hours of the episode airing, the Ellen DeGeneres Show received over 50,000 emails, not fan mail, not requests for tickets. These were letters from people sharing their own secrets, their own hidden truth, their own impossible situations. The show's servers crashed twice from the volume of responses. Michael Harrison, the oncologist who had treated Sarah, watched the episode from his office at Portland General Hospital. He later admitted that seeing Sarah's courage on television forced him to confront something he had never acknowledged: how often medical professionals make decisions about what patients can handle without ever asking the patients themselves. "Sarah changed how I practice medicine," Harrison said in a follow-up interview Ellen conducted 3 months later. "She made me realize that protecting people from truth isn't protection at all. It's isolation. And isolation is often more painful than any diagnosis." The episode sparked the creation of the Sarah Matthews Foundation for Medical Truth, which advocates for transparent communication between doctors and patients facing terminal diagnoses. Ellen became the foundation's first major donor, contributing not just money, but her platform to amplify the conversation. But perhaps the most profound impact was seen in the thousands of families who, inspired by Sarah's courage, began having conversations they had been avoiding for years. Adult children called aging parents. Spouses admitted fears they had been hiding. Friends reached out to friends who seemed to be struggling in silence. Ellen received a letter that particularly moved her, from a man named Robert Shen in San Francisco. "My wife has been battling depression for 2 years, but we've been pretending everything is fine with our kids and extended family. After watching Sarah, we realized that our protection of others was actually preventing them from being able to help us. We told our family the truth last weekend. For the first time in 2 years, my wife smiled a real smile. Not because her depression is gone, but because she doesn't have to pretend it isn't there." The ripple effects continued for months. Medical schools across the country began incorporating Sarah's story into their curricula, using it to teach future doctors about the importance of honest communication and patient autonomy. The episode became required viewing in several ethics programs. Ellen herself was changed by the experience in ways that surprised her. In interviews, she began talking more openly about her own struggles with depression and anxiety, topics she had previously kept private. Sarah taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. Ellen said during a particularly candid interview with Oprah Winfrey, "It's the only way to truly connect with people. All these years I thought my job was to make people happy." Sarah showed me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make space for people to be sad, scared, or struggling. The physical tissue that Ellen had used to wipe Sarah's tears became an unexpected symbol. Ellen had it framed, not as a morbid keepsake, but as a reminder of the moment when television became something more than entertainment. It sat on her desk next to the photo of Sarah, a daily reminder that authentic human connection trumps polished performance every time. Sarah's blog, Living While Dying, continued to grow even after her death. Her family kept it active, sharing not just Sarah's final posts, but stories from the community of people who had found courage through her example. The blog became a gathering place for anyone facing terminal illness, chronic disease, or life-changing diagnoses. On the first anniversary of Sarah's episode, Ellen dedicated an entire show to the concept of living truth. She brought together families who had been inspired by Sarah's story to have their own difficult conversations. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio as parents, children, spouses, and friends shared how Sarah's 5 words had given them permission to speak their own truths. One guest, Maria Santos from Phoenix, shared how watching Sarah had given her the courage to tell her teenage daughter about her own cancer diagnosis, which she had been hiding for months. "I thought I was protecting her," Maria said through tears, "but I was actually robbing her of the chance to be strong for me, the way I had always been strong for her." Another guest, 16-year-old David Kim from Seattle, talked about how Sarah's story had inspired him to tell his parents about his struggles with suicidal thoughts. "I saw how alone Sarah felt keeping her secret," David said, his voice steady despite his young age. "I realized I was making the same mistake, just with a different kind of dying." The anniversary episode ended with Ellen reading a letter that Sarah had written but never sent, found among her belongings after her death. "Dear Ellen, I don't know if I'll have the courage to give this to you, but I want you to know that sitting in that chair across from you was the first time in months that I felt truly alive. Not because you took away my pain, but because you gave me permission to feel it out loud. You showed me that the worst thing, being honest about dying, was actually the best thing, because it meant I could finally start living again. If my story helps even one person stop pretending and start being real, then every moment of fear was worth it. Thank you for seeing me not as a cancer patient or an inspiring survivor, but as a human being with a story worth telling. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." As Ellen finished reading, the studio fell silent again. Not the shocked silence of that first day, but the respectful quiet of people honoring something sacred. Then slowly the audience began to stand, not in applause but in acknowledgement of what they had witnessed, the power of one person's truth to create ripples that reach farther than any entertainment ever could. Ellen looked directly into the camera for her closing remarks. Sarah Matthews lived 34 years, but in her final months, she lived more authentically than many people do in decades. She reminded us that we're not here to perform happiness, we're here to experience humanity in all its beauty and pain and messiness. If you're watching this and you're carrying something alone, please don't. Your truth matters. Your story matters. The episode became the most watched daytime television program of the year. But more importantly, it became a catalyst for change in medical ethics, family communication, and the way society talks about terminal illness. Sarah's 5 words had started a conversation that continues today, in hospitals and homes, support groups and medical schools, anywhere people are learning to choose truth over pretense, connection over isolation, love over fear. Ellen DeGeneres built her career on making people laugh. But that Wednesday afternoon in Studio One, she did something more important. She helped someone die with dignity and live with authenticity. And in doing so, she reminded all of us what it really means to be kind to one another, not by hiding difficult truths, but by creating safe spaces where those truths can be spoken, heard, and honored.